It started with a whistle. Sharp, distant, ignored. A train passed the small town of Fairford without slowing. Again. For the third time this month, the conductor skipped the stop where most black workers waited.
Mama kept saying it was just technical issues. But I saw the pattern. Every time there were more of us than them, the train kept going. So I wrote it down. Every time. Date, time, names.
The school textbooks said Fairford was quiet. They didn't mention the closed factories or the buses that stopped early or the diner that only served certain customers inside. But Marla wrote what they didn't print.
I started with a notebook, then it turned into a folder. Every time someone looked the other way, I wrote it. Every time someone spoke up, I underlined it in red. They called it exaggeration, but I called it history, happening in real time.
One morning, the principal found the hallway covered in chalk arrows, all pointing to a giant map Marla had drawn on brown paper. It showed the train line, the skipped stops, the schools with crumbling walls and the ones with brand new labs. It wasn't vandalism, it was truth.
They tore it down before first period, said it was inappropriate, but not one person asked if it was accurate. After that, others started bringing chalk. At first, just lines on sidewalks, then symbols, then questions.
It started with signs taped to lockers. We see you. Then came the ones at the bus stop. Why don't they stop for us? The teachers said nothing, but some nodded. The superintendent visited the school. The signs were gone by then, but the silence, it echoed louder than words.
We weren't trying to be famous. We just wanted the train to stop. We wanted to stop eating last, to stop pretending it wasn't happening. They called us ungrateful, said we were ruining the school's image, but the cracks were there long before us.
Sunday morning. Marla stood in front of the town library with a folding chair and a megaphone. At first, just 3 people came. By noon, there were 40. No marching, no shouting, just stories. One by one, people stood up and spoke. What had been whispered for decades now had volume.
Mr. Grant told us how he wasn't hired because clients wouldn't feel comfortable. Mrs. Aisha said the lights outside her house were turned off every time a patrol car passed. And I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about all of us, even those who hadn't yet found their voice.
The library gatherings were quiet, but they made noise in City Hall. A letter arrived at Marla's home. Unsigned. Just one sentence. Stop before someone gets hurt. Then came the new school rule. No chalk drawings, no flyers, no gatherings after class.
They tried to make it feel like we were doing something wrong, like truth needed permission. But every threat just made us louder. When they closed the school auditorium, we met at the church. When they locked the gates, we climbed fences. We were young, but we weren't small.
It was supposed to be peaceful, just candles and stories in Redbridge Park. But before the first name could be read aloud, sirens tore the silence. 3 police cars, a voice on a bullhorn. Disperse immediately or face arrest. Marla stood her ground.
I wasn't afraid of jail. I was afraid no one would remember why we stood there. So I held the mic. I read the names. George, Brianna, Elijah. Even when they took the batteries out of the speaker, I shouted.
That night, footage went viral. Not of violence, but of resolve. A 17-year-old girl holding her ground while floodlights lit her tears. By morning, The video had 2 million views. By noon, news trucks lined the streets outside Marla's school. They tried to paint her as a disruptive child. But footage showed calm, determination. A girl standing with nothing but words and courage.
I didn't want to be a hero. I just didn't want to be invisible anymore. They asked me what I wanted. I said, a bus route that stops in our neighborhood, books without missing pages, schools where mold isn't normal.
Students from other cities sent letters. Colleges reached out with offers. But Marla stayed because the work wasn't done. 3 weeks after Red Bridge, over 1,000 people marched silently down Main Street. No chants, just signs, justice, education, dignity. The school board called an emergency session. The mayor, once dismissive, now listened because silence had grown too loud to ignore.
I watched my classmates speak without trembling, watched janitors, teachers, and parents nod as we spoke. It wasn't just about race anymore. It was about respect. We didn't need to burn buildings. We were building something else, a future where no one had to beg to be seen.
Within months, the district passed new equity policies. The school hired 2 new counselors, both from the community. And for the first time in 40 years, the curriculum changed. The headlines faded, but the work stayed. When the cameras left, the students remained. They created tutoring programs for younger kids, hosted film nights about civil rights, planted a memorial garden in the schoolyard. Each flower named after someone history tried to erase.
Change isn't fireworks. It's not a finish line. It's planting something and watering it and believing it'll bloom. Some people still roll their eyes when they see me, but more people nod now. Some even join us.
The state noticed. Funding increased. Other towns sent delegations to learn from students. Marla was invited to speak at a university. She wore her school hoodie. She stood behind the podium, not as a guest, but as a teacher. Marla's mother, once cautious and tired, now walked into school meetings with her head high. She had seen her daughter do the impossible and realized she'd been strong all along, too. The janitor, Mr. Bell, started teaching history after school. He taught not from books, but from memory. And Darius, once suspended for talking back, now led workshops in 10 schools. He spoke about pain, resistance, and joy.
Justice isn't a statue. It breathes, it falters, it heals. I don't want to be remembered as a girl who yelled. I want to be remembered as a girl who listened, who stayed when it was hard, who built when others walked away.
Red Bridge became a symbol, not of perfection, but of possibility. And Marla, she didn't just win a fight. She changed the ground it was fought on. 10 years later, Red Bridge High held its first Unity reunion. Past students returned, not as victims, but as educators, artists, activists, and leaders. The gym was filled with laughter, photos, and hand-painted signs from years ago, now framed like sacred scrolls.
I walked past my old locker. It still had the scratch I made the day they called me nothing. I didn't erase it. It's part of my story now. One of my old teachers hugged me. She said, "You taught me more than I ever taught you." I cried, not from pain, but from recognition.
Justice didn't come overnight. It came in quiet hours, in choices, in staying. It came in children no longer flinching at their own reflection. It came because people like Marla refused to disappear. Years passed. The banners faded. The chants stopped echoing down the hallways, but something more permanent took their place. Marla became a teacher. She didn't plan it, but when one girl looked at her with the same question in her eyes she once had, Marla knew she had to stay.
She asked me, "Did you ever feel like you didn't belong?" And I said, "Yes." And I stayed until I did. Sometimes the best justice is not what you win, but who you raise.
At the edge of the schoolyard, the memorial garden still bloomed. Students still added flowers. Some were for names they never knew, and others for names they'd fight to remember. Justice, at last, had roots, and it kept growing. On the 15th anniversary of the protests, the city renamed the Central Square Marla James Plaza. There were no fireworks, only candles, hundreds, each held by someone whose life had changed because one girl said, "No more."
I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to be seen. And when no one looked, I stood taller. When they shouted, I didn't sit down. If you're listening now and you feel small, remember, even a whisper becomes thunder when truth stands behind it.
The world didn't become perfect, but in that plaza, under the bronze statue of a girl with one raised fist and a notebook in her hand, a new generation sat cross-legged, learning their story. The light Marla left behind still burned, and now it was theirs to carry.